The Elder Scrolls 6 is one of the most anticipated games of the 2020s. When it was announced in 2018, we got a small little fly-through trailer with the title screen, and now some 8 years later we still have the same exact amount of information as we did back then. Between the years of 2018 and 2026, so far we've gotten two major releases from Bethesda Game Studios, Fallout 76 and Starfield. The reception of these games have been incredibly suboptimal for Bethesda, and I believe it has put them in a situation that is feeling pretty unwinnable for a game coming at least 15 years after the previous installment. I don't want all this to seem like I am wholly negative about The Elder Scrolls 6. Honestly, I'm quite the opposite. I'm one of the few people that still have some amount of faith that The Elder Scrolls 6 can be a good game, but I do want to point out some things that I feel like are objective truths about the game, as well as what I'm expecting and what other people are expecting from it. This game is not going to be an objective Game of the Year nominee. That isn't the level of quality to expect out of the studio anymore. But The Elder Scrolls 6 does have one factor that will help its perception with fans, and that is honestly how much Starfield and Fallout 76 were seen as failures by the general fan base. The primary failures of these games felt more like wholly unique issues to the games themselves rather than purely Bethesda being incompetent at making games. The quality of storytelling and character depth might have fallen off much further than people would want, but I still think that the core issues of Starfield and 76 is the design of the game almost more than the content within it. Starfield is a game that I feel like would have been able to stand on its own legs and cultivate an audience had it just been created a completely different way. There are so many technical limitations that rob the game of having the feeling that Todd anticipated out of it. The ability to be some hotshot space captain flying your ship, getting into battles, and exploring the cosmos sounds like a perfect setting for a good RPG experience, but it comes at the cost of running on Creation 2.0. There are too many technical limitations that restrict the game from being able to realize its fullest potential outside of the glaring story problems that I talked about previously. I feel like I could have at least enjoyed the story that we got a little bit more if I didn't feel like I was constantly being stopped and started over and over again with incessant loading screens and menus to navigate. One of Creation's gimmicks that Bethesda is clearly not ready to give up, and was one of the core roots of why Starfield was unable to capture what they were going for, was the use of cells and object permanence. They do not want to give up that ability to pick up any object, move it, and leave it, and have it be there exactly in the same spot every time you come back to it. This gimmick has been entertaining for the last couple of decades, I'll give them that much, but I'm not sure how much value it's still bringing to Bethesda games, especially with the performance cost that it expends. I honestly don't care anymore that I can pick up a half-eaten sandwich, bring it halfway across the fucking universe, drop it, and then if I come back 40 hours later, it's still right there. If this feature comes at the cost of me losing 40 frames in every place I go to because it is constantly trying to render and account for the physics of 80,000 dynamic props, the return isn't worth it. Getting rid of that in exchange for a more seamless exploration and increased optimization for the game seems like a complete no-brainer decision at this rate. This feature hurts Starfield the most out of any Bethesda title because it forces the players to have the planet sectioned off into grids. It makes the programming of seamless space travel impossible, and it makes these cities that are supposed to be big, sprawling capitals into just slightly bigger Fallout settlements divided by 100 loading screens for each building. That kind of feature is just not compatible with the scale that they were going for that game. I believe that the biggest problem that was in Starfield but can be fixed in The Elder Scrolls 6 is that sense of scale. Bethesda clearly knows how to make an open world that is handcrafted with human hands, creating dungeons and environments and other landmarks. This has been their bread and butter for years, and Starfield was trying to do something way out of their depth. I know a lot of people are clowning on Todd in that interview, saying that they're going to go back to the styles of Skyrim and Oblivion for Elder Scrolls 6, and that 76 and Starfield were very different to that format, but he is right. Starfield is a Bethesda game in name only. It was intended to be a space adventure game first and foremost and an action RPG second. Having one big open region was how they did things during their heyday with cities and dungeons littering the landscape. Starfield relied heavily on procedural generation and placement of points of interest because space exploration took priority and they could not have conceivably handcrafted 1,000 planets or even just one location on each of those planets. Because of the design taking priority of space exploration, the story had to follow suit as well, and it really paid the price because of it. A story based about exploration, but the exploration being incredibly unrewarding just leads to having a story that isn't rewarding either. Starfield isn't No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky works right now because people don't go into it with the expectation of it being an RPG. No Man's Sky is proudly a space exploration game, and then they added features on top of that that builds onto the game, rather than Bethesda lying to themselves saying that Starfield is an action RPG with tons to explore. This is a problem that is very easy to correct in The Elder Scrolls 6 by just going back to what you know. Build a singular detailed region. Don't try to get super cute with everything and making every hold its own Skyrim-sized map and then filling those up with procedurally generated dungeons, and have a couple of personalized to the region and handcrafted points of interest sprinkled in. In RPGs, people don't like the feeling that they've already done something. Things have got to be unique and have purpose, and that's where Starfield dropped the ball. All those generated dungeons serve no purpose other than just being shooting galleries. On to the other game that people have been really upset with Bethesda about is Fallout 76. But Fallout 76 is a game that almost stuck to the core principles, but just tried a very experimental idea that ultimately destroyed its reputation no matter what you do in the future. We can talk ad nauseum about the Atom Shop and microtransactions, but the root of the problem was that this game was created to have 0 NPCs on launch. This might have been the most ambitious project I've ever seen in my life. Todd was expecting the players to become the NPCs, run their own stores, and give each other quests. Some people in charge of this game thought people were really going to be willing to be the ultimate role player and do all the busy work and labor that comes with being a vendor and build empires with the resource settlements, when ultimately nobody wanted that shit. When people talked about wanting a multiplayer Fallout or Elder Scrolls, they wanted the ability to play with a couple of their buddies, like 3 or 4 of them, not have the entire world completely dependent on other people committing to the bit and having terminals and holotapes everywhere in the story. Why would people do that? To their credit, things have improved over the years with 76, and each update adding more NPCs and more questing like an MMO. The bones of the game are just built on having that no NPC mentality, and you can still kind of feel how empty it is, since all the holotapes have just kind of been replaced with 1 or 2 static NPCs that talk to you about all the same things that those tapes said. I have tried to give 76 a few fair tries, but that launch impression is just really hard to wash away when you can still see the imprint left of it everywhere you look. 76 did right by creating a detailed world with locations feeling relatively unique and having a story to tell, but it's still just not a proper Bethesda game because it was built as an MMO-based experience. Doing choice and consequence doesn't really happen there, because how do you make that work in a server with 20 plus people in it? This issue can once again be resolved by just leaving The Elder Scrolls 6 to a single player experience, or at the absolute most, a co-op experience up to 4 people. These 2 games, while being Bethesda mainline titles, really only do it in name because the contents within them and the structure that they were built around were so antithetical to the content and world building ethos that they have built over the years. I wanted to give a rundown on those 2 previous titles to show while it is good to criticize those games for the components that will be shared with The Elder Scrolls 6, it's also good to remember that these games did poorly, and the major contribution to that poor performance was that they were very experimental and very different games. The Elder Scrolls 6 is a game that will live and die by the mentality that you go into it with, because ultimately it will be a return to form, for better or for worse, we are yet to know, but it can still be a vast improvement over Starfield and 76. There's quite a number of things I'm beginning to expect out of this title, and I want to keep it real to myself in a way that I don't feel like I'm forcing myself to see more good than there is, or going with such a bad mindset that the improvements that they make don't feel like anything, because I'm just going in with the expectation that the game is awful because I got burned in the past. I think the number one thing that many people should prepare to temper their expectations for is the main story of The Elder Scrolls 6. With Emil still at the helm of the writing team at Bethesda, we're just going to have to understand the story of these games will come second to the gameplay loop. At least we are lucky enough to be part of an established timeline and have history with the Elder Scrolls rather than having to come up with a completely new history and new universe for the game. While they might not have a true Elder Scrolls Bible that they follow, it's not like there's nothing. A room of writers aren't coming up with completely new universe level lore to the franchise. I'm expecting it just to be another story of a chosen one type, and you're a prisoner who gets caught up in some region ending, world ending threat without any really serious level of depth to it. It'll be a generally on rails experience for the main story with a couple of memorable moments and quotes, but no one's really going to be writing essays on the hidden meaning and the profoundness of what they were trying to get across. But the main quest has really never been their strongest suit in Bethesda games anyway. Don't get me wrong, I want them to make vast improvements to storytelling and interconnectivity with the companions and the factions. God, especially the factions. I would do anything for factions to truly matter and not just be a vessel for getting side quests done, but rather impactful and interesting with their ideologies and have them be debated by fans. But I'm just going to keep myself grounded in what I expect versus what I want. Bethesda completely breaking their mold is a completely unrealistic expectation. Even after 15 years, it's not something I'm anticipating. So if you go into it thinking that there's going to be some sweeping changes in the narrative tone and story direction, you are going to end up hating it. If there's one thing I have a lot more faith in for the Elder Scrolls 6, it will be the world. Anything is a vast improvement after Starfield as long as they just keep everything in the same region and keep it handcrafted. I'm certain the world will be however many times larger and however many times the detail, as Todd always says at the big show, and it's always a half truth, but this is something I'm willing to believe in this time without really knowing anything yet. This could completely bite me in the ass once we see a gameplay showcase in like fucking 2028 and it turns out the map is actually 12 Skyrims large and has a bunch of generic dungeons. But I don't really believe they're going to go with that route because of the feedback of Starfield. Building interesting mini stories and side content with the dungeons is infinitely less challenging than creating a deep, branching main story, because these can stay pretty self-contained, or at least they are outside of faction missions. If they really do want to live and die by the KISS method of keep it simple, stupid, then they definitely need to follow their own advice and stick to what they know works instead of getting incredibly experimental. Make something that's able to stand on its own legs rather than something that people will just pick apart for an eternity. The capacity for it is already in the house, man. People might have critiqued the main stories of games like Fallout 3 and 4 as well as Skyrim for having weak main stories, but almost everyone agrees that the side quests and the side stories are always interesting and they're well liked. You don't have to change the things that you do well just for the sake of trying to change or trying to broaden the scope of the game. You know the exact ratio content to scale of the map, and you just need to keep expanding on that. I think this is something that they will be able to do right to their credit. But you know what is something I wish I could give them credit for, but I fear will just end up being pretty rough in the Elder Scrolls 6? The companions. Skyrim might have had the worst companion system out of any relatively modern RPG. Followers are more of the apt name for them rather than companions, because these fellows just existed to be a walking backpack with one voice line. Can you tell me the name of any of the other housecarls than Lydia? No, it's physically impossible. You looked it up. You had to have looked it up. These people served zero purpose. I can count on one hand the amount that even had a quest remotely attached to them. Most of them you get for buying a house, or you pay them 100 gold to follow you around to the ends of fucking Nirn. I fully anticipate the followers to be slightly improved versions of what they were doing in Fallout 4 and Starfield. They will be people. They will have some level of questing attached to them. They will have an affinity system. But I don't expect those quests to really make me feel compelled or care for them, because they'll just trauma dump on me within 4 minutes of me giving a homeless guy a sweet roll, because the affinity system that they work with is so bare bones. I truly want the companions to be good in this game. The companions are the most important people in RPGs. It's a fundamental part of the fantasy Dungeons and Dragons experience that these games pull from. Give me people with complex backgrounds and complex allegiances. Give them hard stances on certain subjects and let them have a natural progression of becoming closer to the player character, rather than you did a good thing X amount of times until they admit their undying love to me. Bro, I met you literally 3 days ago. Why are you trying to get me to replace your dead husband after I picked a lock? Is that not fucking crazy? I want people that I fear doing the wrong thing around and making the wrong choices around them because I don't want to lose them and their skill sets. You can have people like Veronica and Boone in Fallout New Vegas because you want people that are developed for those skill sets. If you want a tank that does a lot of damage, you have Veronica. If you need to kill people from range, you have Boone. And these characters have complex, rewarding stories around them. You have to work towards earning their trust and their stories. I want people to be their own people that happen to be following me around in a party, rather than them existing solely to serve me and my ambitions. But I do anticipate them to be similar to how they have been doing things, but if there's anything I desperately want them to change and expand upon, it's the companions. My last piece of speculation I think is going to be the most important part of the game is the gameplay itself. We can pretty much assume that the story will be pretty weak just because of the track record of the latest games, but if there's one thing I do worry about, it's the gameplay just being a more simplified version of what we got out of Skyrim. Gameplay is easily the biggest question mark out of everything that we could guess about The Elder Scrolls 6 because it's just been so goddamn long since the previous mainline entry in the series. It's probably safe to assume that the skill system will be progression by doing and using the skill itself, just like the previous titles, rather than a blanket XP system and picking perks. I don't really see them changing that kind of system, even though it would fit better with how they're trying to present their games to a larger audience and it's easier to understand flat perks like Fallout 4. But I really hope they do find a way to make the game a little bit more complex and better suit build crafting with everything, because as much as I love Skyrim, the game just boils down to being a stealth archer every single playthrough. I don't necessarily think that they're going to be or even need to bring back spellcrafting and all that, but I do want to see more fantasy elements in the game and really emphasize buffs and debuffs and having advantage over enemies and those enemies having advantages over you. The last thing I want is the game to be even more simplified for the sake of selling to more casual fans. Casual fans have proved time and time again that they do have the capacity to learn things and get better at building their characters. It's not like games like Elden Ring are niche experiences. Those games got people who never even played video games before into them. At least keep the options that Starfield has where you can change every piece of the difficulty to your own desire instead of just being flat HP increases for enemies, and then they do more damage to you. Ultimately, the point of all this is that it's good to speculate about the things you want to see out of the Elder Scrolls franchise, but we also have to be a little bit more realistic of what we're going to end up seeing. The Elder Scrolls 6 is going to end up being a game that your perception of it has already been decided yesterday with how games like Fallout 4, 76, and Starfield turned out. Bethesda's reputation has become so divisive throughout these years that most people have either become bitterly angry towards them and will just meticulously pick apart every single part of these games to find things that they hate and prove that Bethesda has fallen off and that's a good thing. Or, on the other side of the camp, Bethesda is an infallible company that people simply just don't understand their vision, or you're just expecting too much out of them and that the core audience for these games are just regular people on their couches and shouldn't be looking too far into games. I can see some merits in both of these arguments. It is true that Bethesda has fallen off as of late and the quality that they've been providing is subpar, but I can also realize that maybe their style of game just isn't for me anymore. I want deep and engaging experiences out of my RPGs. I used to love this company and their games, and I wouldn't say I hate them now either. I'm just airing out the things I want and the things that I expect out of the Elder Scrolls 6. After all, it is fun to speculate and theory craft about games, but I also want to be a realist and not expect the world out of it. Like I said, most people's minds have already been made up about the game, and I guess in a way so is mine. I'm going into it thinking it's going to be a good but flawed experience, but heaps better than Starfield. I'm just not expecting anything beyond the average Bethesda experience. However, after thinking about it and all the things I want out of it, I truly hope that Bethesda finds the way to Breaking Benjamin blow me away and really bring themselves back into relevance for all the right reasons. Most importantly, keeping an open mind is just as helpful as giving criticism for work sometimes. Writing an entire game off because of the mistakes of the past isn't the greatest mindset for going into a new game, because you're going to end up finding a lot of things that you don't like, and you're going to keep reaffirming your biases towards the game even if you see things that are objective improvements. But also, it's totally okay to be excited for the game as well. I know how easy it is to fall into the negativity train on Bethesda. Shit, I dunked on Starfield for half this video. But I want it to be seen that it's coming from a place of passion and not just because it's trendy to do. Most of this game and its perception is going to be the energy that you go into it with is going to be the energy that you come out with it. With the amount of time that we've been waiting for this game, there's no way it's going to meet everybody's expectations and truly be a masterpiece. Bethesda has never made masterpiece games, but they have made games that are fun and enjoyable for so many people, and I think that's the turnaround that we can expect out of The Elder Scrolls 6. It's more of a return to form rather than just digging the hole deeper that they made with Starfield. It's a game that I feel like is a stepping stone, as much as that is like an insane statement for a game that's over 15 years away from its previous installment, but I think this is going to be the learning experience for Bethesda going to the games like Fallout 5. But honestly, there's just so much more I could say, but I'm starting to ramble at this point, and I'm certain I'm just going to make more Elder Scrolls videos in the future that I can cover more things like what I want to see out of the Elder Scrolls 6 in more depth. But ultimately, I just wanted to cover what I'm expecting out of the game and its major parts, and hopefully give people a little bit more hope in the game rather than just keeping everything entirely negative like I've been seeing on the internet. But yeah, that's about it. See ya.